Okay, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a review for another Oris watch. Big fan of Oris on the channel. A little bit about the brand. They were founded back in 1904. They are of course Swiss made, and I'd say although they're an independent Swiss watch group, let's say if they were falling into the tiers of the Swatch group, I would compare them to kind of the Longines, Rado, kind of that higher range. You know, it would be below Omega and Blancpain, which are more in the prestige / luxury range, but definitely above kind of the Hamilton and Tissot in that middle range. So this particular watch is of course a pilot's watch, and a little bit about pilot's watches. Some key common characteristics and design language you're going to look for. Basically, it's really all about that balance of legibility and functionality, which I think this particular model has in spades. This is of course the Oris Big Crown ProPilot Date. And the particular model is the actual sunburst gray dial. Now, apart from the dial, there are some other minor differences to the standard version, which we'll go over in the video. But let's go ahead and zoom out and get a closer look once we get this bad boy in hand. Okay, so this particular piece retails for about $17.50, but you can get it online, you know, via gray market for around $900 to $1,200, and I think it's definitely a very nice value when you kind of consider the other competition that it's going to be going against, as far as, you know, Swiss-powered pilot's watches. There's a lot definitely from the made in Germany standpoint. There's tons of watches with heritage, but I think Oris as a brand definitely is doing the right things as far as, you know, its design language and what it's putting out there. As much as it's known for divers, they actually do have a great line of innovative pilots as well. This of course is a more simple three-hand model, so there's not going to be too many bells and whistles in here, but I think as far as from a, you know, just a looks standpoint, and then of course the build quality, I think it does offer quite a value in the price range. Now the case diameter is 41 millimeters with a 12.2 millimeter height, so not super thin, but definitely not really tall. I think the design as far as that sunk in bezel definitely adds some dimension versus seeing just kind of a larger slab side. They've done some nice design work from that standpoint. And of course this is all in stainless steel. It is a mixture of brushed and polished. Now that's one of the main differences here that you don't catch when you just first look at it. Now on the standard black model, it actually of course has a matte black dial, but also is all matte finished. Here you'll see that the bezel actually is a high polish, as well as the hands, which I think definitely add a nice touch of class and really make this watch a lot more versatile and kind of I guess you could say less flat feeling. So I think that definitely helps, and it almost feels a lot like a special edition versus kind of just a standard model option, which I think is always nice. Now the crystal, of course, is a sapphire. It's double domed with an inner AR coating. So since it's double domed, that means basically it's domed on the outside and on the inside. So when you look at it at angle, there is really very little to no distortion, and it remains very, very readable and legible, which is of course very important when looking at any type of kind of military themed watch, especially in the aviation realm. And then of course, I mean, to me this definitely has that kind of land and sea vibe with the way they did their Arabic numerals. I think it definitely can fulfill kind of the appetite for somebody who's looking for a really nice field watch as well. Now the bezel is fixed in some of the, you know, more high-end models that actually has a rotating bezel where you can control the hour, and it kind of becomes kind of like a GMT hand that you can move on the fly, which is really cool. In this particular model, it is, you know, pretty much just there for looks. Of course, it also does hold the crystal in place, but one of the things I really like is kind of that turbine theme knurling that goes all the way around. So it definitely ties in that aviation feel without, I think being really overdoing it. And there are some models out there as far as pilot's watches where they really take the theme to an extreme. I think this is a really nice balance. And of course the knurling also matches on this great screw down crown. Yeah, that's right. Screw down crown on a pilot's watch, which is really nice, and it actually lines up very nice with the signed Oris logo there. And I should say Oris text right on the crown. Really nice, and of course it is a larger crown. This is part of the Big Crown line. So I think really nicely done there. And then you can even see that there is also a matching knurling as well. And then you can actually see underneath there's a very fine bevel that is polished out as well, which just adds another just touch of just attention and detail and class to a watch that I think at a glance already is pretty great looking, but once you really find yourself taking in some of the fine details, it really makes it an even nicer watch. So really nice. The movement is the Oris Automatic 751, which is essentially just the Sellita SW200-1, which is, of course, hacking and hand winding. It's basically just an ETA 2824 clone. A lot of people have different opinions on Sellita versus ETA. I've had really good experiences with Sellita and both ETA movements, so I think Sellita is definitely, as far as quality control goes, it's right up there with ETA. As far as finishing goes, of course, it's definitely, more standard affair, but that's kind of, Oris's style. And I think that's, I think they're pretty honest about marketing that, that's where some of the savings comes from, is you're going to have basically a more standard movement, but you're going to have all the great case finishing and design, something that's, I'd say a couple leagues ahead in the price range, which used to be Tudor's business model. It still kind of was the modern Tudor business model, the finer cases and bracelets and designs with more standard movements. But of course, Oris has just like Tudor, has also moved into some in-house movements. But I think that's more to kind of it's more about the brand proving that it is a legitimate watchmaker versus, I don't think anybody's, knocking down Oris's door for, hey, at these prices, we should really have in-house movements, because the prices are so good. And then especially when you're thinking about away from retail, even from authorized dealers, you can actually get pretty nice deals on Oris. It's a pretty well-known brand without being so crazy advertised that you're going to be paying a lot for the name, which I think is really nice and ties into Oris's kind of brand motto of real watches for real people. Now back to this particular model, the case back is of course a display case back, as we saw earlier, which is definitely nice to have, especially with a mechanical movement, just because it just lets you know that your watch, it's alive and it's not powered by a battery. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it definitely checks boxes there. So it's really nice to see. Now as far as the watch face, now of course it does have printed indices, sunburst dial, it has the date there at the 3 o'clock position, polished hands, and then it actually uses BGW9 Super Luminova, which is going to be very nice and white and clear in daylight, but then of course in the darkness it's going to have a really great blue hue to it while it's glowing. Now the water resistance here is pretty nice. It's at 10 bar or 100 meters. Now 100 meters water resistance, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, okay, well there's plenty of Seikos that don't even have screw down crowns that achieve 100 meters water resistance, but you have to remember this particular model does have a screw down crown, just like let's say another Oris with a screw down crown. What's their heritage watch, the Big Crown watch that they have, that diver. The names escape me right now, but essentially that watch, I mean, people have actually taken that one diving. It's 100 meters water distance, but it has a screw down crown. You know, so I think somebody actually dove with it down to about 40 meters and did a YouTube video, and it was still, you know, great. Not saying that I would ever want to take this diving, but you know, having the 100 meters water distance with a screw down crown definitely adds another feeling of safety. So not that you really should worry, even if it didn't have a screw down crown. You know that Oris is doing it right, and you know it has the proper seals and everything, and it's not something to be taken very lightly. It's something that it's part of their business. Is, you know, they definitely are into aviation and also into nautical activities, so they do their homework and they put out a product that you can feel confident standing up to the elements, which is always great. Now, as far as the bracelet goes, you know, really classic, of course, proportions here. We have the 20 millimeter lugs. We have solid links and end links like you would expect. One thing that's a little unexpected is that it's actually a pin and collar system versus screws. That's a little bit disappointing. Just because, of course, the similar bracelet comes on the Oris Aquis, which is a great piece and one of my favorites in my collection. But it actually has screw-in links. This one is a pin and collar system. Still definitely, you know, really nice and better, I would say, than, you know, your average just kind of friction push pins that are directional. But it would have been nice to see screws, especially because we know that, you know, Oris has a precision to do screw-in links at this size. So, you know, that's probably my only little nitpick. It definitely would have been nice to have them screwed in, especially since that's something that a lot of micro brands are targeting these days, and it's something that you'll find, and even you know, some of the more boutique-y brands from Germany, like Zinn, for example, which I'll be reviewing very soon. So, you know, really nice piece from Oris, well-rounded, and then the clasp is, I'd say, a real nice standout feature here. Nicely milled, everything feels solid. We have this really cool and quirky kind of single push design there to unlock, and it's just nice. Everything's well balanced, as you can see from a side profile. The clasp doesn't overpower at all, which, you know, you tend to see these days. Everybody wants to kind of build a really nice overbuilt clasp, but sometimes can kind of overpower the balance of the watch head versus the bracelet. I think here it's done a really nice job of keeping it really well balanced while also flowing well with this really nice tapering bracelet. Of course, every link is articulated, which is also really nice to see, because there are many 3-link bracelets, which are basically 3 links just kind of pushed together there with no articulation. They're just kind of connected. Here, there's actually an articulation point in between each individual link there, which is really nice and makes for a very comfortable wear. So let's go ahead and get this on the wrist for closing thoughts. Alright, so definitely wears really nicely on my 7 1/4 inch wrist. Let's go ahead and bring it down a little bit so you can kind of get a better idea of how it is, you know, on the entire arm. I know wristies can seem, you know, really large. You can put a, you know, a 35 millimeter watch on and get a wrist shot, and then it just feels very big and overpowering, just because of kind of the nature of photography and videography and kind of the lens shapes. So as you can see here down on my wrist, I think it fits really beautifully. The 41 millimeter diameter is very wearable, especially since this does have, you know, kind of a thicker bezel. It doesn't push the dial out too far, which sometimes can definitely make the watch wear larger. You know, that's definitely kind of a trick when you'll see watches that are, you know, in the 38 range that have very large dials, and then you'll see some watches that are much larger with smaller dials, and it really throws perspective into there. So you can't really, you know, just rest on the idea that, okay, 40 millimeters and under is my size range, or 40 millimeters and up is my size range. You really have to look at the general proportions of the watch. You know, that dial face definitely plays a very large role, and that's why, you know, divers wear the way they do. It's because they have generally smaller dials because they have a rotating bezel. And then, of course, dress watches often will wear larger because they push those dials all the way to the ends of the case. So definitely keep that in mind. I know a lot of the times when you're shopping for a watch, it can become a numbers game and you kind of filter out everything that's outside of your comfort zone. But I think this is definitely a great example of something that generally at 41 millimeters is going to kind of meet everyone's inner check boxes, but at the same time, I think on wrist really presents itself really well. Now it wears very nicely, as you can see here, very little gap between the case and my wrist there. Definitely hugs the wrist really nicely. It's something that it does have enough presence and heft to where you're not going to forget about it. You know, this isn't some lightweight, you know, ultra thin case, but it has a substantial feeling, which definitely, you know, lets you know that you have something of value on your wrist, which is very reassuring. Now, as far as model variants go, there are a ton that are in this kind of Big Crown ProPilot range. This was one of the more entry-level watches, of course. You know, the flat black dial is going to be there as well, and then, you know, a bunch of different strap options. On the bracelet, it's, you know, kind of the upper tier of that entry-level line. But I think, you know, across the line, it definitely has a lot to offer. And, you know, I'm a big fan. Comparable models, you know, you got to think about that Zin 556, which I will be reviewing very soon. But that's at 38.5. You got you know, other models, let's say Swiss made models like the Alpina Smart Timer Pilot, which they actually do have a 40 millimeter. And then there's also the Alpiner at the 41.5. So there's definitely some other contemporaries that are out there that can, I'd say, are very comparable. But I think the Oris is a very nice sweet spot with kind of, it does have some, you know, some non-watch enthusiast name brand recognition because it is, you know, quite popular with its F1 kind of heritage and background. And then, of course, you know, from a dive watch perspective, you know, if you like dive watches, you know the name Oris. From an aviation perspective, it's definitely more one of their technical, you know, I'd say strong points. It's something that they've proven themselves to be very proficient at, but it's not something I'd say that the brand is really pushed out for. I think it's definitely more known for the divers and then, of course, motorsports oriented, but the pilots are nothing to kind of scoff at because I think they do have, from a technical perspective as well as from just a quality fit and finish. I just think that, you know, Oris, maybe they're not chasing the aviation route as hard as they do with motorsports or diving, but I think it's definitely worth recognizing. So let's go ahead and get the quick lume shot here. All right, close this. Great lume shot. Let's go ahead and charge it up. Get this kind of full blast there for you. All right, so as you can see, beautiful BGW9. It has that really nice cool blue tone to it. And you know, it's really nicely done. Of course, these are not applied indices, so it's not going to be super thick or super bright or anything like that. It definitely just does the job. Again, this is not a dive watch, you know, although it does have a screw-down crown. It's really not meant to have that ultimate crazy legibility. And of course, it probably could have had brighter lume if they would have laid it on a little bit thicker, which probably would have made it a little bit, feel a little bit more sporty. Or they could have, let's say, used C3, which would have definitely had more of a green hue. And I think with the silver tones, you know, BGW9 was definitely the way to go. But this is not a lume monster like you would think or see from, you know, something out of Oris's dive line. With that said, I'd say closing thoughts is this is a really enticing option, I feel, for a lot of different reasons. It checks all the boxes, it's beautifully made, and it's from a brand that you know and other people know. So if that's something that's important to you, you know, I'd say you should go for it. If you've been on the fence, there's always great deals for this piece online. So with that said, thanks guys. If you liked the video, please do hit like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks guys. Bye now.